Exploring self-awareness through shared experience. Is that the Driftwood Podcast?
That's what I've been told.
I'm Daniel the Wizard.
Howdy, y'all. Fox here.
And this is the Driftwood Podcast.
That's what I was told.
So yesterday, there was so many things I was never told. Now that I'm starting to learn, I feel I'm growing old. Because yesterday's got nothing for me. Old pictures that I'll always see. Some things could be better if we'd just all let them be. Yesterday, there were so many things I was never shown. Suddenly, the time I found I'm on the streets and I'm all alone. Yesterday's got nothing for me. Old pictures that I'll always see. I ain't got time to reminisce old novelties. Yesterday got nothing for me.
And that was Daniel, the Wizard Wilson, with Driftwood's rendition of Guns N' Roses' Yesterday.
Yesterdays with an S.
Yesterdays.
Yeah, that was boom, boom, boom. We cut it up a little bit, got some of the core stuff out of there because with the music and the song, he says, yesterday ain't got nothing for me quite a few times.
That's what I've been told. Finally got it out. Got it out properly.
Yeah, so today, TDP number 54, man. So before we jump into what TDP 54 is about, first off, I want to say TDP 53, banger, super awesome. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go check that one out as soon as this one is over. And then also, if you listen to that one and you're now listening to this one, I'm so glad you were able to join us and come on and listen to another one. So, but yeah, that was with Chastity Llewellyn, the owner of Fifth Avenue Nutrition. So don't forget to go check that out. But anyways, TDP number 54 today.
Howdy.
Rite of Passage. We're talking about Rite of Passage. So
not rites of passage as I was trying to.
Well, writers write, right?
Right.
Well, some writers don't write.
Right.
Some writers write.
Right.
So anyways, we're talking about Rite of Passage today, TDP number 50.
Yes, sir.
54, not 50. 50 was like 4
That
episodes
was like,
ago.
yeah.
It was like a month ago. Damn, it was a month ago, bro.
Well, we knock about 4 out in a month. So yeah,
usually on average, depending on how many weeks there are in the month.
And when I say knock them out, we've been here all day.
It doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Well, the recording of it happens quickly. The build-up presentation of like figuring out how to get everything together. There's a lot of production work that goes into that.
Yeah. I don't know why Sisyphus came to mind, rolling the boulder up the hill. It takes forever. But then when you get to the top, it's like recording happens really quick.
Yeah, it happens very, very quickly. So anyway, so Rite of Passage. So the three things that we're going to talk about here is what is a Rite of Passage?
What is a Rite of Passage?
What is the function of a Rite of Passage? And how to get the experience of a Rite of Passage if you weren't like presented one, or maybe just in general. If you were presented one, how to get more throughout life. All right, so we're going to identify what Rite of Passage is. So I'm going to look up, I have it pulled up, but I'm going to bring up the definition of it. But David,
the web definition.
Do you want me to bring that up first before we give our discernment of?
Yeah, sure. Bring up the official.
Yes. So,
and then we'll give our driftwoodisms of it.
Oh, I forgot I pulled up the lyrics.
Yesterday?
Yeah. All right. So the dictionary on Google searches, I put what is a Rite of Passage, and it pulls up the dictionary from Oxford Languages. It says a ceremony or event marking an important stage in someone's life, especially birth, puberty, marriage, and death.
Right. That being the end of their life, but sure.
Yeah, that is definitely a Rite of Passage.
Bye.
Passage to beyond.
To the Passage, yes.
Passage to the next version.
Ooh, if you haven't read the book, The Passage, and you're kind of post-apocalyptic / vampire / zombie, it's atmospheric. I like it.
I think that they made a TV show.
They did.
Yeah, I don't think it went on for very long.
No, they ruined it and it ended, thankfully.
Thankfully, I often look for like TV shows of books and stuff to be. I hope they're good because if I really like the book or something, I really hope the TV show encompasses what I liked about the book. Usually it doesn't, but hopefully.
Yeah, in all honesty, I've tried to move beyond that to the point where I just look to see how someone else might interpret it visually. That's
right.
It might be good, it might not be. I have no hope.
All right. So what does David see the Rite of Passage as? What is a Rite of Passage?
Okay, so not something I have thought much about definition-wise. Obviously, the more I think about it now, there's things that would fall under that category that I have thought about. But after these last few days of us like knowing that this was going to come up, so spend a little more time thinking about a rite of passage. I went into the whole thing of like, if you're going to make a sea passage, a journey across an ocean, you need a ticket. That's your right to board the ship, to make the passage, or a passport if you're going to travel across a border. That's so I got distracted by that a little bit. But in a way, a rite of passage is that ticket, is that certification, that acknowledgement of your ability or your right to attain a certain level, to be acknowledged as being on a certain level. That's kind of, I know maybe that sounds very vague.
No, I get it. So to go a little bit further into the definition, just to go on top of what you said. So it gives lower down on Wikipedia. It says a rite of passage is a ceremony or ritual of the passage which occurs when an individual leaves one group to enter another. It involves a significant change of status in society. Right. So I think that might add to those things that you were talking about. So earlier I had pulled up something too that had given about, it was 1909 was when the term, the phrase rite of passage was coined.
Turn of the century.
Yeah, if I find that in a little bit, I'm not going to keep looking. I did have it pulled up, but because I searched other things, I forgot to save it. So that's my fault. But anyway, so a rite of passage for you, just a quick brief overview. It's basically that, like that ticket that gives you that ability to go beyond, to go to the next, to take the travel to where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to put it down to one single phrase definition, I would say it's a signifier of being at a transition point, or passing a transition point. Okay.
So for me, a rite of passage has always been like the group recognizing the individual is ready for whatever it is. Like it's always been about the group recognizing the individual was ready. Right. So they go through the tradition of showing them, it's like a celebration of the completion of the passage, right? Right. So the rite of passage is saying that you've completed this stage and now we're moving on to the next one. Right. So that's how I've always seen it. So the ceremonial things like the quinceañeras and Sweet 16 and stuff like that, obviously culturally they're different ages, but they're essentially the same thing. But anyway, so for me, the rite of passage, it is about the group recognizing it for the individual as well.
So I don't want to be reductionist about it, but are you saying that a rite of passage is a gold star issued by the community?
I think in some ways it's community's acknowledgement of your capability.
Okay.
I think it's like, I think that it's kind of grandiose, right? But I do think that it serves a purpose, right?
Oh, definitely. And I think,
but I do think it is It's a show. It's like my idea of a rite of passage, right? It's a show, right? But recently, because we've been talking about it, that's formulated a little bit differently now. But essentially, the core base of what I thought a rite of passage was that. Right. So obviously, with my son being where he's at now, and me thinking about this whole idea of a rite of passage, because I'd never officially received anything, I thought, right, until I start looking into what rites of passages actually are. And yeah, I just realized that there was certainly things that were rites of passages, but to no end. Like there was no like defined goal that they were to achieve. Like what were we doing this rite of passage stuff for, right? So again, I kind of had a negative view on it. It was just more for the community than the individual. Now I'm realizing that I had a pretty obscure view about it, but yeah.
Well, in terms of rites of passage being something traditional, and we were talking earlier at length about the somewhat negative view that is generally had of the idea of tradition or something being traditional. So, but if you look at rites of passage as a traditional thing, and look at the context of when those traditions came about and what those rites signified. So what I'm trying to get at is in possibly in it's our culture, our technological level, that those things have become very I don't know, blurred, undefined, maybe not sought after, maybe even seen as negative. But in a more primitive culture, or a less I don't know I don't want to use the word less, because to me it's not really less, it's just not, it doesn't have the same mindset or the same...
Well, it doesn't have the same traditions as modern society.
Right.
It's a different societal set. Like,
right.
It's a different parameters.
Mm-hmm. So like in a tribal setting, the reason that you send a boy, he is a boy at that point, of 16, out into wherever
I think they do it way before 16. I
12,
think they're probably like 11, 12 when they do this stuff.
Yes. I was trying to be PC, but yeah, some tribes, it's like 12-year-olds get sent out and they have to hunt and kill the prey themselves and survive out in the bush, build their own fire. And this is a test for a 12-year-old. So, you know, and then the thing is, once they've proven that they can go out into the bush, provide for themselves and bring back food to the tribe, they're now a hunter. They've now got their hunter's badge.
That doesn't mean go send your kids out into the wilderness and say, hey, go figure it out.
Go get your hunter's badge.
They do a lot. Like, there's 11 years of teaching how to do those things.
Of course.
Before they send them out. They're not sending 11, 12-year-olds out unprepared.
Child abuse.
Listen, these children go out there probably with some confidence.
Oh, sure.
I would say, and it's like they're excited to go do this. Like, it's a build up to this point. Now,
because they've spent all this time learning it, but now when they prove that they've learned it, they're going to get their recognition from the tribe.
The community gets to recognize that they are worthy.
Yeah, he's a boss. He can hunt antelope.
All right, so we've defined it.
Right.
What are some examples of, just some loose examples, what are some things that the people, this is the thing that I thought, I didn't have any rites of passages, but then I go through some of these things that are, like, well, I kind of did, but they weren't, again, to a goal. But what are some examples of rite of passage?
Well, traditional Western ones of learning to drive a car, graduation.
Prom. So,
and I guess birthdays in general, since the West makes quite a big celebration.
Yeah, but that's an annual thing. I don't think that that's so much a rite of passage.
Or what about like your 16th birthday? You're expecting something good, aren't you? And your 12th? Pretty sure.
Well, I think transitioning to a different stage of life. I think that that's the point.
Yeah. I mean, look, not every birthday, as you say, but within those, certain birthdays are like markers.
Well, first off, when you turn 30, you're out of, you know what I'm saying? Like that type of thing. Those are
out of luck. What are you gonna say?
Well, there's things that people do societally that when you turn 30, the dirty 30 type of thing, right? Like now you're an adult. Now you can't act like a kid anymore. You need to have had it figured out. Well, I think society expects by 30 you to have shit figured out, man.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the timeline everybody runs on. You're supposed to be settled down, married, and starting to have kids by 30. All right.
Well, yeah, the 15-year plan I was talking about when you're 16, you're like, that's 30.
Shit. That means in 31, I got to have all this shit figured out. Damn. It's like that's literally twice the amount of life that I've lived so far. That's not very much.
And then if you don't have, what were we saying?
Well, anyway, more examples. So like baptisms. That's a rite of passage. So like if you're in a religious family and stuff like that, and then you choose to give your life to God and so on and so forth, you go wash yourself of the sins, right?
Walk over coals.
Right. You go get baptized. You're reborn. You're rebirthed. You have acknowledged that you're a sinner, and you can now proceed onward with repent and all that stuff, right? That is a rite of passage for Christians, right? So in a lot of people's lives, that is something. Like I said, I was baptized. Like I've gone through the whole thing of choosing all that stuff, right? So like I said, there have been things, but when I look back, we only really went to church after like an extremely difficult time in our family, right? And then we started going to church, but it was supposed to be this fix-all. I think that was the expectation.
Yeah.
Right. And so like this whole thing of like buying into it, and then you go through the rite of passage of accepting it. I thought I was supposed to feel different, right? I thought all of these things were supposed to feel like, these things were taken care of. Obviously, as an adult now, those things, I feel like a child thinking those things, but that's how I viewed it, right? So choosing it, like I kind of was like persuaded, I guess. I don't think I was persuaded. I felt like that was going to solve my problems. I was
Well,
sold a bill of goods.
Well, does that tie into what your definition of what a rite of passage is?
I think that's why I was so bothered
acceptance, gaining acceptance from the group.
The group accepting that you are the same as them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it was always a really weird thing. I had trouble signing phone contracts, right? I don't like commitments like that.
Oh, yeah, you were saying earlier you never joined a gang.
Yeah, I didn't join any gangs. I avoided that. But some other examples are a bat mitzvah, right? So I think that in the Jewish faith, the Jewish tradition, I think at 12 or 13, they do this whole ceremonial thing to transition from one stage of life to the other. They have to read from, I think, the Torah and stuff like that, right? I'm not too familiar with it, but I understand that those things exist.
That's when they get to meet the guy who traumatized them as a baby.
So killing a lion. That's another traditional rite of passage. You were talking about earlier going out into the bush and surviving or whatever. And like I think there was this movie called 1000 BC or something like that. And the kid goes out and he has to survive in the wild, and he ends up killing this. I don't remember what kind of. I think it was like a lion or something like that.
Saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah, actually, I think it was a saber-toothed tiger.
Sounds about right.
But how he killed it was he was strategically backing into these two rocks, and then when the saber-tooth lunged at him, he fell back with a spear, and it lunged at him. It landed on the spear, but he was far enough down in the rocks that the rocks caught the weight of the thing, and he was small enough to fit in at the.
Well, there's some Native American tribes I vaguely remember that one of their rites of passage was for a boy to prove that he's a hunter, he had to kill a bear, and the same method is used: a pointed long pointed stake, and you let the bear fall onto you. So apparently, I don't know if that's just
that's rough,
tall tales or what.
So I was listening to something, and I wish I could give credit, but I don't remember what it was. But they were talking about that some tribes orchestrate kidnappings, right? So they orchestrate kidnappings. The men and the women of the tribe orchestrate the kidnappings for the coming of age. I think it's always the men. So the men of the tribe kidnap. It's orchestrated again. They're not really kidnapping them, but
right. It's organized terror. I got it.
Right. Yeah, actually, yes, it is. And I think that this is a modern thing that happens right now. So the women, yes. So the women, after the kidnapping happens, they talk amongst themselves and then with the men when they come back about how well they sold it. Right. That's one of the common social things to talk about after is how well, how theatrical was it? How sold was it? How real was it? Right. Because the whole idea is to give a genuine experience.
How well did everyone play their part?
Exactly. To benefit the children
in the indoctrination.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So they kidnap the kids, they take them out, and I think they camp or some stuff like that. But they do treacherous, they do hard things with them, right? But it starts with the kidnapping of them getting basically a bag over their head and them getting taken from their mothers.
I don't know why, and I hope I ask forgiveness to whoever is listening who knows who this is. I don't recall. So but I recall being told about a mother taking a bunch of kids from church to the Halloween horror house, which was basically like a Baptist version of a Halloween haunted house, except it showed all the things that happen to you when you go to hell.
Hell house, is
that what it is?
Yeah.
So I heard, and the person reporting it to me saying, "Oh, this woman took her kids there." She was like a little bit ambivalent about whether that was a good thing or not. To me, I was just like, the child abuse bell was ringing louder than I couldn't hear what she was saying anymore. To me, it was like, you're traumatizing these freaking kids talking about disembowelment and burning alive and boiling oil and Jesus.
All right, so
have mercy.
Let me give you some preface. I think I have some experience with a specific thing that you're talking about, Hell House.
Yeah.
So essentially, it was put on by I think a non-denominational church.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they basically.
Sorry, my apologies to Baptists.
Well, it was to present the horrors of living a
sinful life.
Yeah, right? Drinking and driving and all this stuff. Like, so they would set up like car scenes, like car wrecks, and it'd be like this really. My notepad fell. It would be like this really like it's presented as a scary thing. Like this could be your future if you do these things. Right. So it was really a way to instill fear at a time where it was okay to instill fear.
Right. Like an axe wielding maniac dressed in cannabis leaves.
Yeah, so
no, it's Bigfoot. It's okay.
All right, so as a kid though, going to this stuff, I thought it was hella cool, and as a non-religious person at the time, I was just like, "Oh, sweet, we get to go see we get to go see some gore." But that was the trap.
Right.
That was the trap. They lured the people in like me. They were like, "Oh," and you're just like looking like, "Oh, I'm a piece of shit." Like I do some of that stuff. I'm a piece of shit. Like I'm gonna end up like that way. Man, I'm just gonna go solve that problem by doing more of that.
The thing. So you went. Dang, forget about it. Drink more. But you went there voluntarily, is that right?
Yeah. Well, I actually went there to like try to go on dates, pick up chicks, things like that. I was like 14.
Nothing better than scared chicks.
Like 13, 14. I was somewhere around there. I was just coming into puberty, I think. I really hadn't had a girlfriend. I was
very
really
linear thinking there, haunted house girlfriend. Yeah.
Oh yeah, get a girl that's scared.
Yeah. She'll get.
Funny story. Funny story about this. Actually, so I met this girl one time there.
Oh, yeah.
And man, this was the first time I'd ever asked a girl for her phone number.
Oh yeah.
And she gave it to me.
Oh no! Wow, first try. Wow.
But
nice.
I didn't write her name down.
So it was a random girl's number.
No, I thought I remembered the name, and I wrote the name down later.
Oh, mistake.
I called the number. Listen, I called the number. Okay,
no.
This is the silliest shit. I'm
gonna
embarrass myself here. Okay, so I thought the name was Son, like SON, but I don't know. I still don't remember what this lady's name was. I'm so sorry. We were kids. I'm so sorry. But anyway, so I called the phone number. It was a house phone.
If you're listening,
I doubt it. But
get in touch.
Anyway, so it was a house phone, and somebody answered, and I couldn't tell if it was her or not. It was definitely a house phone because you hear the click when it picks up, right? And I got super nervous, and I'm like, is Son there? And they're like, who? And I just hung up, never called it back again. I just now remembered that because I met her at Hell House. We were in line. I was like, oh yeah, we were vibing a little bit, right? We were talking. I was really awkward and weird. You have to understand.
Yeah,
so I would wear like hand-me-down shoes for my friends because I didn't have like the cool shit. So my friends would get new cool shit and they'd give me their old cool shit.
Nice.
So I was wearing like a pair of Doc Martens or something like that, right?
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. I was ready to pick up the chicks, right? Wearing my hand-me-down t-shirt, my hand-me-down pants.
Nice.
At a church event because I heard that's where the freaks were.
Yeah, it does happen.
That's what that in the middle schools, man. That's what we talked about. That was like, yeah, man. All the freaks are at the haunted house.
Oh dear.
Let's go to the church haunted house.
Well, anyway, the reason I brought up the whole hell house, that was that the person taking her kids there, she was treating that as a rite of passage, like as part of their religious development.
Okay, so let's analyze this a little bit.
All right.
Okay, so you said that you're woo. We're going off about child abuse,
right.
and I'm not going to disagree with you, but I do have some questions.
It was just my instinctual reaction, dude. It was just
what triggered that instinctual reaction. What about that? Do you think that the caused that? Like, oh shit! Like, why are they doing that? That's so damaging to the child. Like, what do you think about what primitively? What do you think it is?
I think, I just feel that fear is sometimes a useful motivator, but not one you should use on people you love.
Here's the thing. People, I talk about this a lot to a lot of people. So I think people don't understand the difference between respect and fear.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that
confused.
I think that there's a really big distinction issue with what people think respect is, and they actually mean fear.
Yes. Because
it's about controlling and all of that stuff, right? So the distinction between fear for me and respect is simply if you're scared of punishment, that's not respect. If you're fearful of, if you're scared of punishment, that's fear. But if you do it regardless of punishment or consequences.
Well, I would say maybe if you broaden it a little to subservience. It doesn't really matter why, whether they do it out of fear or out of need, out of desperation, out of whatever. As long as they're subservient, and that's what the people mistake for respect.
A subservient individual is a respectful individual.
Apparently, but that's not true.
That's just somebody that doesn't speak against.
Right.
That's not respect.
That's someone who doesn't speak their lies openly.
All right, so now that we're on respect, we'll get on this for just a little bit.
Sure.
So respect. When you say, so if somebody, I think that this ties into Rite of Passage, but
it will somehow.
When you say somebody like disrespects you, like, you know, when you have those moments of like the disrespect, like this joke, this meme that I say, the disrespecttion, right? The
Nice.
Disrespect. So like when you feel disrespected,
right?
Okay, first you have to be able to identify what respect is, right? At what part of this are you being disrespected?
Not necessarily. Do you remember part of security training we had to do gang awareness, and it was like we did like what their definition of respect was, and so there was like respect, retribution, whatever. So there was a retaliation, 3 R's, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
So, but in the gang mentality, at least how we would, as far as I remember, how we were instructed was that the respect that they define as respect isn't actually what we would, like ordinary citizens wouldn't call that respect. What they're calling respect is the fear of the other gangs not to interfere in their business.
It's about controlling their things.
Yes.
That's the respect.
And not having their pride. Their pride is mostly about status. And so someone damages their status or their perceived status, that's disrespect.
Okay, so fear. If you're using fear to give someone a rite of passage, right? If you're thinking like, ooh, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Here's the thing. Maybe that is child abuse, but also maybe you don't know the plan that's to be there afterwards also. Right? What if that is there to present things, to now present opportunities to know, to figure out, to learn? What if, I don't know these people, but what if there's something in place after that? Could that take away from it being child abuse, or would that, does that not change? Do the circumstances about why you're doing it? So you're taking them there to show them the rite of passage, but then when you leave, it's about the message that you're trying to instill, with that being the rite of passage, right? The principle of what you're trying to instill. That's just a tool to instill it.
So then we're back to the very simple philosophical thing of the ends justifying, or the means justifying the ends.
Like, does that matter?
Can you ignore it?
I don't think you can. So with a rite of passage, I don't think it's safe to do that, because just because it was done for you and that's how, like, you were taught to do it, it's tradition. That doesn't mean that that's the right way. That's a way, right? But we should be thinkers. We should be able to figure this stuff out sometimes, right? But so the rite of passage, using that as a rite of passage, I don't think that I agree with that for my philosophy, for my life. But I also don't know the full circumstances and in what's going on there, because. So, but to analyze it, I don't think that I could use that for my children as a rite of passage, because there's too much fear there, right? I have a problem with, like, my kids coming around the corner and somebody going, rah, and spooking them, right? Because then they're going to be scared to walk around corners.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to think about, like, all this stuff. So if you're trying to do a rite of passage, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish with the rite of passage? And one of the things that we were of the three things we were talking about was, what's the function of the rite of passage? What's the goal of it? What are you trying to achieve with the rite of passage? Right. What's the point?
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily relevant, but there is I heard about this Himalayan marriage rite, and basically what it involves is the man who is supposed to marry, so the groom, he goes out into the mountain and basically gets himself a good dose of hypothermia. Hypothermia. And
not the hyper one, the hypo one.
Yeah, the basically frozen half to death. And then he's brought to her hut or her house, and then she has to nurse him back to health from near death. And if she achieves that phenomenal task, they are husband and wife. If she fails, well,
she gets killed.
I don't know about that part, but he's definitely not alive. Next.
Yeah. So he doesn't get to marry if he
doesn't get to marry if he doesn't survive.
Yeah, if she doesn't save him, he doesn't get to marry her.
So that's kind of weird.
Listen, what if that's a way to give up? Like, shit, okay, cool, this is my future. Well, I'm giving up.
Her cooking's awful. I can't take this. I'm not spending the next.
You hag, your cooking's killing me. Your cooking's killing me.
Literally killed him.
So, anyways, what's the point of a rite of passage? Like, what is the rite of passage supposed to serve? So, I think society, like things like prom. We said something about prom. So, I went to prom twice.
Nice.
Right, but I also realized that a lot of people dream to go do those things and never do, and I think that it was stupid. And people get offended when I was like, yeah, it was dumb.
Well, I tell you what, I do remember 2 proms. and I don't know why. Maybe that was 16 and then 18 or something. I don't know, whatever. And I have to say, there was a lot of hype about it, a lot of excitement about it. A big deal was made by a lot of people. My memory of it is so minuscule. It's like, it's not really even, it's like, it's definitely a day that was different to other days, but not like, oh yeah, you know?
So,
like,
mine was distinguishable because, like, so I think it was my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had foreign exchange students there, and there was this female who had...
Was her name Son?
No.
No. Just checking.
But I'm not going to say what it is.
Okay, no, maybe not.
It's pretty close to that.
Okay.
But anyways, I got asked to prom, and I thought it was silly that somebody would ask me to prom, so I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go.
Boo, party pooper.
I still went.
Oh, yeah?
I wasn't planning on going. A friend of mine was going. They had an extra ticket, and they were just like, hey, like, you should ride with me. We're going to go up there. And I was like, shit, cool, okay. And then, like, I showed up there, and then, like, she was there. She'd gone with somebody else, and I was like, man, I feel really shitty because I told her I wasn't going, and then she had to go to somebody else and all this stuff, and I was like, I'm a real asshole.
Oh, dude, that reminds me.
So welcome to the Rite of Passage, assholes.
Nice.
So not knowing how to interact and deal with those things, guess what I did? I left. I was like, oh, this is extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I left and went and got drunk.
Nice. Safe option.
So that $50 ticket for prom that somebody else spent on, we went, and I don't think either of us had dates or the group of us had dates. We just all went as a group of guys. In our, I guess, best dressed Sunday dress, I guess. I don't know. I didn't get a tuxedo for this one. The one before I did, though. But yeah, so it was really weird. I felt really bad, man. So not knowing how to have that rite of passage, not knowing how to experience it, I didn't even know what the fuck it was for. I still don't even know. I don't know what prom is for. I don't know.
So that answers my next question. I was going to say, so what was it supposed to do? Like, what is prom supposed to do?
I don't know, but a lot of people do it. I think it's something about the celebration of being a high school student amongst your peers, and then just being able to celebrate that with them in the moment. I think that's more of what it is, like the small. So you know how you have spheres of like we call it the atmosphere or whatever. So like each group of people has its own like atmosphere, and then that group can be part of a larger group, but that group itself, right? So yeah, maybe it's about representing that time where you're all together, where you're probably not going to be very many more times.
True.
Right, and I think it might be a tradition that if people understood. I think some of the students there actually did understand it, which is why they were so adamant on like, oh my God, it's prom. And it's like, oh my God. But why? Why do they feel that way? What's been sold to them to think that that's the, I still don't understand the function, I guess. Maybe it's supposed to feel that, but I don't know. But what are other functions that Rite of Passages are supposed to serve? Because I don't get that one. What is the point of Rite of Passages?
Well, if you were going to be, like, say you were going to join a club, like a very private club, like say Skull and Bones, they have their rites of passage, and basically that is intended, as from what I can figure out, it's some really embarrassing stuff that you have to do in order to be part of the club, and they take pictures of it, and that way you never betray the club.
We can really go on some conspiracy shit here.
Yeah, well, that's just my very
no. Like beyond that, like with the Bohemian Grove and shit like that, and all that stuff, right? What are the ceremonies that they have for their rites of passage?
Yeah, what burning of the care? That's a rite.
So like all of these cults, man, they all have rites of passages too. You have to do things to commit yourself to the thing. So it's a rite of passage saying that you are like us.
Have to drink the blood of Satan.
Yeah, or hazing. Hazing is another example of a ritualistic rite of passages, right? Think about like, I listened to a bunch of stuff about like cults and stuff in police departments.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things,
secret fraternities,
secret societies, secret fraternities, stuff like that within police departments and things like that. So, the hazing, some of the hazing is to weed out the weak. It's to find the people that can't hang, right? And someone that can take the hazing, they'll keep their mouth shut, right? Like there's that's the whole rite to passage, right? That's the rite of passage. So once you prove your worth, then we will accept you. So is the rite of passage an acceptance thing?
So yeah, it could be a celebration of the acknowledgement of your worth.
the acknowledgement of your worth. But is it the acknowledge? So maybe the individual is supposed to feel the acknowledgement, but it's a celebration so the community can celebrate it, right? Celebrate that person acknowledging their worth.
Well, hell yeah. From our example earlier, if you have another graduate hunter in your tribe now, that means more meat.
More potential for meat, not more
well,
meat.
not more potential, but more hunters who can get more meat.
Well, you have more potential for meat, certainly. Yeah, you have more chances to get meat. And also you allow the skills to carry on and progress to the next generation, right? So the learned skills should be part of the rite of passage, right? So once you've learned those skills, right, part of the rite of passage is to leading up to test your skills, right? That's another rite of passage thing, is to test the skills that you've developed to enter into the next stage of life, right? So if you look at all these ceremonial things, it looks like it's supposed to be there to test yourself about the skills that you've developed.
Like learn to drive a car and passing your driving test.
Yeah, so you test or you practice to do those things, so then the rite of passage would be the handing off of the keys and shit like that after you've done the accomplishment part, right?
Getting your license.
Right, yeah. So the whole rite of passage is actually the build-up. The rite of passage is the ceremony. The passage is the buildup. The rite of passage is just the ceremony part of it, right? So it's something that it has to achieve something, right? So the ceremony is supposed to achieve something. Is it self-awareness, self-acknowledgement? Is it about acknowledging what you're capable of?
Well, I mean, that would definitely be proven to yourself by that point.
Because the ceremony doesn't happen. So I don't know about in all of the rites of passage, but like baptism, like there's a certain thing that you have to do before you get baptized.
Right. There's requirements. Then there is a process. And then there is completion, acknowledgement of completion.
Yeah. So, and then the same thing with like, so what's the like the Sweet 16 and the quinceañera? What's that supposed to represent? Is that supposed to represent going into womanhood or whatever?
Apparently, that's what I was told when I first came over here and I was curious about it. I counted it. I was told, yeah, that's to celebrate when a girl becomes a woman.
Yeah, so culturally, the Hispanic culture obviously is 15, and the more American modernized culture, I guess, is 16 with the Sweet 16 and all that stuff, being the legal age to drive and all that stuff in most states. So I think that's part of the Sweet 16 deal, is you getting your first car and all that stuff. There's supposed to be this big monumental thing that society sells you, right? I think they used to have a show that was called like Sweet 16, where it was like this show where these girls, their dads or parents, they just give them the most lavish 16th birthday and all this stuff like that.
Can I be on that show?
Right? It's like, shit, I just want to be involved. I'll be a caterer.
I don't care about the girls. I want a birthday.
Shit, I'll just be a caterer. I'll be happy to be there.
You're going to eat some hors d'oeuvres.
Rub elbows with the right people, man. You just go take your bow tie off and go walk around like you're supposed to be there. Be distinguished, man.
Right.
It's all about presentation.
Suave.
Right? Suave. No, that's a cheap brand of shampoo.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, inexpensive. I don't want to call their products cheap because I don't actually know the quality of it.
Cost effective.
They do have quality control number for issues. Call this number on the back of those bottles.
They have to put that on there.
I wonder if those numbers actually work. I'm sorry, we're getting off into the woods.
Nobody ever calls.
Nobody ever calls it. It's a dead line. They haven't updated the number.
Ringing. Your call's important to us. Please hold.
Please hold. Yeah, to no end. Right.
That's how many complaints they get. No.
Yeah, you're. That's just, I guess, the assumption, right? So the rite of passage. So, I guess it serves multiple different things. I guess the rite of passage serves multiple different roles. I guess it depends on what position you're in and what you're going to, right? But I do think the rite of passage has to be, for it to be an effective rite of passage, I think it has to be something to represent the skills that you've developed and to test those skills, right? And to show it amongst the public that you are capable of doing those things. It's not just hearsay. It's not just words. It's not just thoughts. You are capable. So the rite of passage, I think, would be determined on what you're trying to achieve, right? But again, it would be a buildup, a presentation of you achieving those things. Like, let's say you take the SATs, right? And I don't know if there's some sort of like ceremony people do when kids get accepted into college, right? I don't know, but I think that's a thing people do, right? So you take the SATs, you've done all the work, you get accepted into college and all of that shit. You have a celebration because boom, now you're on to the next part of your life. You've achieved this level. Let's celebrate it.
I thought that, yeah, there is a lot of celebration. Like in Western culture, we love to celebrate, like anything.
But we celebrate the weirdest shit. We don't celebrate the things that you should celebrate.
Well,
Sorry.
as far as the rite of passage goes, there's a lot of concentration, a lot of focus on the celebratory part of it. But I think what's maybe missing is actually the acknowledgement of what you've actually achieved, what the significance of that achievement actually is.
What's the core principle of what the accomplishment is supposed to represent?
When you've killed a lion or a bear or an antelope or whatever, it's pretty clear what you've achieved and what that means. There's one less lion or one more
Well, what if
antelope.
you had this really progressive person in the tribe was like, oh, that defenseless animal, why'd you go kill it? To prove that you're a man?
Yeah, no, that's the meme. Vegetarians in tribal is a tribal name for the guy who doesn't know how to hunt or cook.
My wife's dad, hanging in his kitchen, it says vegetarian. It's basically means bad hunter.
Okay. Translates as that.
Oh no, it breaks down. It gives like a definition. It says vegetarian, right? And it says in definition under it, bad hunter. You know what? I have something to say about vegetarians, right? You want to attack people, not the ones that don't attack, the ones that live their life the way that they live their life. Hank Williams Sr. said it best: "Mind your business, and you won't be minding mine." But anyway, so the vegetarians, right? Think about the plants that you're mutilating and destroying just to consume all of these things. Consumption of things is sinful if you look at it that way. In general, consumption of things is sinful. So you have to take something to consume something. So you have to take it from somewhere else to consume it, right? So but it's a transference of energy. It all depends on where you draw the line, right? And you're drawing the line at living, breathing things. I don't draw the line because I think plants and animals are equal, the same as humans are equal. But sometimes I got to get fed. I'm sorry, I went off on a little bit of rant.
Yeah.
Sorry, moving on. Rites of passage.
Mind your own biscuits. No, mind your biscuits in your own business, and everything will be gravy.
So, to identify what it is, the core principle of what the rite of passage is supposed to do, that's I think that's the best way to have an effective rite of passage. And I think it depends on, I don't know, if you don't have any tradition. So we talked earlier about how there's a negative connotation with that, right? Right, with tradition. Right, but I think if you look at it in the sense of what tradition is, so for me, tradition is the things that are passed on. Right, that's tradition. Right, Hank Williams Jr. sings a song. I might get to Hank Williams third if we keep going.
Nice.
But Hank Williams Jr. sings a song called Family Tradition, right? So basically the song starts out with him talking about how
it's a family tradition.
Well, he's not following the family tradition because he doesn't do the things that the family does. But then the second and third verse is, but actually I am. It's carrying on the family tradition just my way. All right, so understanding what the principle of the tradition is. Right,
the principle of the tradition.
Right, so if you know what the core principle of tradition is, it's a lot easier to be fluid with progressing tradition, right? So if the principle in society, old traditions don't always work with new society. You have to be cognizant of that, right? You have to understand that sometimes tradition becomes antiquated, and you have to modernize it. Like, if you are to exist within the society. I mean, obviously, you have the people out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania that are building the things with their hands, right? The Amish. You know, like, you can exist separate from society and have your own society, right?
Sure.
You can. Sure. But to exist within society, your traditions have to be progressive with society, or else you have to live separate from society. Right? So the principles, the moral value of things and all of that shit, all the things that people get from religion and all of the other stuff, like the morality, the ethics, and trying to understand all of these things. If you're having a rite of passage to achieve, to represent all of the things that you achieved, whether it be religious, or whether it be through school, or whether it be through life, right? Even on like up into, like if you get a promotion at a job, right? Maybe there's some sort of thing that happens at the place, right? So it's a rite of passage for the company. Like once you get promoted, you have to like sign this board or something like that, right? That's a rite of passage. It's still a ceremony that represents all of the things that they worked hard to achieve.
Just on the Amish, as far as tradition goes, the Amish are seen as having maintained their entirety of their tradition. That's not true, because by having to interact with people who do not follow the tradition, have modern appliances whatsoever, they've had to change and adapt. So their traditions, even their traditional traditions, have had
because
to,
of what's available.
right, and that is what allows them to continue actually existing in their traditional way.
Actually, yeah, that's actually why they've been able to remain traditional, is because they have adapted. They've adapted. They actually go out. So up there, they actually have like construction companies. Like they'll go out and build stuff for people. Right. So some of them have modernized a little bit with the same principles of what it is, right? But to grow wealth in the community and stuff like that, you have to introduce new money into the community. Therefore, you have to go out and get new money.
Right.
So a lot of Amish build furniture, right? So you can buy some really, really quality furniture at a really, really affordable price. Not really, it's expensive, but it's handmade furniture. And when you think about handmade furniture, it's fairly reasonable as far as what it is, right? So again, Rite of Passage depends on the culture, I think, right? So I don't even know what Amish do for their Rite of Passages. I think that I watched the movie that Rungsfelde or something like that, where they go out and they get to go see society for what it
Rumspringen or
something like that. Yeah. So I think it was in the movie Sex Drive. So probably not fully appropriate representation of what it actually is.
Well, I mean, I think a closer maybe, I'm just speculating, the traditional German Rite of Passage for a carpenter, where after he's received the instructions as being an apprentice, received the instructions from the master carpenter, he then goes on a walkabout
to different places to test his skills,
practicing his skills. And then once he's learned what he could from his master, and now he's developing his own skills, his own talent, his own methods. And then that's the journeyman stage. And then once he's past the journeyman stage, obviously then he becomes a master craftsman himself.
Right. Even specifically like with electricians right now, there's a timeline that you have to like exist in to be able to do those things. Yeah, you have to spend 2 years as a journeyman to be able to get. I think it's 2 years as a journeyman. I don't know specifically, so I'm not gonna say. But you have to.
But there's a process.
You do have to operate in a process. You have to be an apprentice, then you have to be a journeyman, and you can be a master electrician. Your licenses dictate what you're able to do, right? What you can sign off on and things like that. What you're capable of working on. Because I think with an apprentice, everything has to be signed off by like a master or something like that. I don't know.
Well, in a way, that is almost very similar.
Plumbing's the same way.
That's almost very similar to the tribal thing, where you get sent out by yourself to test your skills, and if you done your learning good, then you come back successful.
Well, you go around to different different other different towns and things like that to go stay there, to go live there and work there for a little bit or whatever, right? You go travel, you go get experience, you go learn something, and then you come back.
Well, in a way, the fundamental of that is that you can exist without the tribe. Basically, that. Right,
it proves that you're able.
You're actually a valued member because you don't need the tribe.
And you chose to come back to the tribe, right? Right. So I think a lot of that too is like with a bunch of rural small towns and things like that. If you leave, they think that you've given up on the place, right? Like, like this whole idea that you're supposed to go out and learn things and bring it back to the community. It's lost.
I kind of like that. I think that's. Yeah.
I think that's the appropriate way to grow your community, right? Because you go out and you experience life separate from the community that's there, and then you bring it back to the community and share it. And everybody does their own version of this, and it grows the community.
Yeah, the thing is, with these traditional...
This is clearly idealistic. It's not clearly that simple, but...
Right. Yeah, these small town communities, they certainly have the hope of the young blood returning with skills and wealth.
I think they don't want them to leave, because when they leave, they feel like they've betrayed them.
The thing is, if that's what you truly want, if you want the young'uns to return after they've, you have to give them something that they want to return to. The thing is, a lot of these towns are built and maintained for the older people who like it that way and they want to keep it that way. And that's what makes it unattractive to the young people to return to. Who wants to return to live in an old people's retirement home when you're starting up a family?
So that's why all these small rural towns die off, is because there's nobody there to continue on growing the community or keeping it stable. Because all of the people that come in then are transplants, because they're just passerbys that didn't find anywhere else to be, right? They don't bring any sense of culture or anything like that. They're just drifters like everyone else, So, but once you, I guess, spend some time somewhere or whatever within a community, it doesn't even have to be a place. It's a community thing.
Right.
I think now with technology, it doesn't have to be a place. It can be just online. You can have a community online.
Very true. Very true.
You know, it no longer has to be a place. I think that that's something technology presents to us. All right, so Rite of Passage. I think that we're still talking about Rite of Passage successfully.
Yeah, we're still on the subject. Okay.
So one of the things. So first off was, what is the Rite of Passage? We discussed that a little bit, and then what's the function of a Rite of Passage? I think we discussed that a little bit, but I think that there's still a lot to be determined on what I think what the Rite of Passage is supposed to do. Again, because I'm trying to figure this stuff out because I'm having kids and things like that. Not having them, they already exist, but they're growing. They're getting older. I have a 12-year-old son that's about to turn 13, and I thought that I wasn't given a Rite of Passage, and I still feel like I wasn't. I was giving the examples of rites of passage, but I didn't understand what it was for. I still don't. All right, so I'm trying to give my son something that makes sense. So that's why I'm faced with these questions of what's the function of it. The third thing that we wanted to discuss was how to get the experience of the Rite of Passage. Right? So with somebody like me that I really felt like I didn't get given a Rite of Passage, I still had to learn those things. Right? Because once I felt like I didn't need the Rite of Passage to know that I knew how to do those things. That's my point. Right? It didn't have to exist for me, right? But it definitely would have made it easier to know that I knew the things that I needed to know, right? Because I didn't know the things that I needed to know, and I had to figure them out. Right? The Rite of Passage is supposed to give confidence that you know the things that you needed to know, I think. So for me, how to get things that you're supposed to get in Rite of Passages, how to get that out of other things. Right, because you still are obligated to learn it. Just because you weren't given a Rite of Passage or you don't feel like you were, doesn't mean that you get a pass for figuring it out.
Right.
It doesn't mean you get a pass. You don't just get to sit and just be a victim. You don't.
Well, I think as far as the functionality of a Rite of Passage goes, so what you're doing is you're working towards something. You're dedicating yourself towards something. You're working, as I said, working towards something. You're working to attain something, right? To build something, and then when you've done that, there will be a response from someone or someones. So what you really want, if you're trying to synthesize that Rite of Passage thing, what is required is for you to dedicate yourself to something for someone else, to whom that thing you've dedicated to, they will recognize as useful to them.
Does it have to be commonly recognized?
No, I don't think so. For instance, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, okay, so say you get a part-time job at a carpenter shop sweeping out, like. You just go at the end of the day and you just sweep out, and then
sweep up all the wood shavings.
Right. And then maybe one day, one of the guys is working late, and he says, "Hey, can you put down your broom and give me a hand with this?" And you learn how to like run a board through a mill or something. I don't know, whatever it might be.
Oh, that's actually one of the ways that I learned how to weld.
Right.
Like production or to be on site welding is I actually got a job as a fire watch. And then moved to another job. They didn't want to get rid of me because I was a good employee. So like, can you do this? I got a job as a welder's helper, got promoted up.
Nice.
And as a welder's helper, I mean, I already knew how to do some of the stuff,
sure.
all right? But I didn't know how to pass an x-ray. All right, so as a welder's helper, basically they had me doing welding, and then they would just have a welder check it. All right, so as a welder's helper, that was my apprenticeship. Right, that was me learning how to do that stuff, right? So yeah, it was kind of like the same thing.
Right, so was there some point where basically you felt that you passed the bar, so to speak, where they said, yep, Daniel's good to go, he knows how to do it?
Not there, but yes, I eventually got there, but it wasn't there. So what that did was that sparked the interest in me to learn more, because essentially a lot of things transitioned in my life and I couldn't focus on it the way that I needed to.
Right.
And later on in life, I'd remembered that I'd enjoyed that a lot, so I revisited it. And I massaged that ego part of me for a little bit, thinking that, I was good at it and stuff like that. I was good at it. I am good at it. I'm good at welding. But that's not what I want to spend my life doing.
Sure.
Right? It's cool to be good at it, but I don't want to do it. Right? So why spend the time doing that when I can go do other things that I'd rather spend my time doing, right?
Sure.
So I did eventually feel like I did cross the bar. I did get to a point to where I could like pass an X-ray and stuff like that, right? So I did pass the bar, right? I could go get a job doing that probably right now. Right? I probably could. I'd probably have to refresh a little bit, but I could go get a job doing that right now.
Sure.
So, but with the Rite of Passage, with that coming up, that was one of the, remember I told you that there was a boss that I'd emailed back after I'd gotten fired because I was really appreciative of the fact that he had fired me. Right, like 4 or 5 years after he had fired me, you know, I'd had my second kid and stuff like this, and I was really thankful that he basically made me make a decision. I was standing stagnant, or I was lost. I had nothing to do, and he offered me guidance, and he offered me a rite of passage by getting me fucking fired.
I was about to ask, do you think getting fired for the first time is a rite of passage?
That wasn't the first time that I got fired, but that was the first time I got fired from something that I liked.
Yeah, that sucks.
It sucked. It hurt. It hurt a lot because that's something that I finally felt. I was like, oh, I'm actually kind of good at this, right? But then I got homesick. You know, and the traveling part of it was tough for me, right? So, but there was several other elements that played into it, but yeah. So the rite of passage for that in that situation was me learning all these things and then getting it taken away from me, right? It's like, cool, you know how to do all this stuff, so now go apply it now, right? Go apply it. Listen, we taught you, we gave you the core things that you needed to be able to be successful. Now go do something with it. They invested in me, man. They invested in me, but it wasn't a worthwhile investment after a time because I wasn't producing the way that I should have been producing based on the investment, so they had to make a change. Simple business, I think. But the emotional part of it is, man, he knew my situation and he was still able to fire me. So I commend him for being able to fire somebody that probably would be very difficult for most people to fire. The situation that was presented, just had my first kid, I was struggling, I needed the money and stuff like that. And it's tough because you're able to give somebody a job, but they're not fulfilling the job that you want them to fulfill. I took it personal. But that's why I sent the emails, because I took it personal for so long. I felt so like backstabbed and I felt shitty. So one night I was sitting up late, and I actually still had his email saved because I'd sent him an email, and I'd seen an old sent email. I was like, oh shit, I wonder if the email address still works. I don't know if it did or not, but I sent it to that email, never to have a response. But I sent it. It's probably still in my sent folder unless Google deletes that shit.
Maybe.
But anyways, yeah, so that was, I guess, a rite of passage in some degree, but it was unintentional. Right? So how do you get those things, right? I wasn't given a mentorship or whatever necessarily, but now I'm given this information now what to do with it. I'm responsible for doing something with it. Right? Just because I don't know how doesn't mean that I can sit there on my hands.
I think the more I think about it, a rite of passage maybe is just a marker that you've overcome something.
Maybe
the recognition part isn't even that important externally. Maybe just you yourself recognizing that you've overcome a certain hurdle or level or whatever, certain obstacle. That's it's about that recognition, I think, for yourself more than anything.
But for that confidence about the communal recognition, right?
Sure. I get that. But again, it's kind of difficult. Like for me, at say age 40 something, to me, for me to celebrate learning to drive a car, it's like it's societally, it's so how do you say, so out of sync.
Yeah, so I want to point out, when you learned to drive a car, dude, I was so happy for you. Right. I was like so happy because I can't imagine how difficult that would be with everybody looking at you, expecting you to know how, and you just know that you don't, right? And then you were able to overcome that, and shit, you've driven me places now. Right. So it's gotten from the point to where you couldn't even essentially you couldn't even start a car. Right. To where, now you can chauffeur me around when I got a broke arm, right?
Nice. It works out well.
I mean, but think about it though, right? You had to experience that differently than with the way of rite of passage would have presented it, right? So like you're taught these things early on in life, and you get to experience the acceptance or like the acknowledgement of I've achieved it, right? So I think Justine earlier was talking about, like, we were talking about the stages of children, right? Or the stages of life, and we were trying to identify, what the stages of life may be, from like baby to toddler to young adult, all that stuff, right? All through those progressions. Now, we didn't get all the way down through the progressions, but essentially, like, I think in different stages of life, like when we look at that, she had pointed out something like midlife crisis, right? So, like,
As being
obviously,
a
that's
stage
a
in life.
recognizable stage in life. You can say midlife crisis, and everybody kind of knows what you mean, where you just have, like, I think, where you just have a crisis of reality. You're just like, damn, what do I want out of life? I've been living my life this way, and, like, I got this. This sucks. This isn't what I wanted. I think that that's a midlife crisis. I think that that's what that is. I got fortunate. I had mine way before midlife. Unless that is the midlife point, then I'm fucked.
Well, yeah, that is one way to look at it. That's why I've been trying to avoid mine. Just keep putting off that
Keep
crisis.
putting off the midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're talking about all of those things and, like, how maybe age, society, there's so many things that play into the role of what and how a rite of passage is to function, right? And even just trying to identify the age groups and what they are to accomplish. And we were talking about school, right? So obviously, traditionally in America, schooling is different than in England, in UK, or whatever, because that's where Justine is at,
Sure, yeah.
right? So whenever we were talking about the schooling, I was saying second grade, right? This should be, they should have these skills by second grade, and
Right.
I thought that was a common way to do it. But I realized the rites of passages that children get, it's different based upon the community that they're in.
True, and I would even go as far as say the individual household.
Well, I think the household is a representation in some ways of the community too.
Sure. The immediate community connecting to that the family connects into. Yeah, sure. Yeah, like the whole thing with potty training. To me,
Going through that right now with one of my kids.
Right. To me, it is absolutely horrendous when I see a 3-year-old still wearing a diaper. I think, and I know, and again, that is my own personal bias.
No, I'm bothered with that as well, because by the age of 2, they should
have sufficient control.
They should be, at least by the age of 2, be in the process of being potty trained.
Right.
By the age of 2.
Right.
So I
gaining
think
that bowel control and yeah.
And I think if you give kids credit, they actually know way before that.
Yeah.
So like my son right now, he's like, he's about to turn 2. He turns 2 in July, right? So we're in the process of potty training him, and he's actually pretty much got it down pat. But the thing is, we almost were lazy parents and missed it because we had so much stuff going on. He was giving us all the signs of, like, I'm ready to potty train.
Yeah.
And we were just too passive about it, and we almost missed it. But luckily, we have enough experience behind us in knowing that if we missed it, it's really difficult to come back. You know, with Harrison and stuff like that, right? When you miss those opportunities, it's really difficult because, like, there's pivotal points where these things are really easily learned, right? And it's right at the point of understanding. So when you can present some sort of rite of passage to acknowledge the achievement to the person, to the child, maybe it's like hey, you pottied for the first time, yay, and then go out and tell everybody in the whole house, let's all congratulate him because he did do the thing that he was supposed to do.
Right.
The other thing that I pointed out to your sister, though, is all that shit stops. Like, once you learn how to walk, once you learn how to potty train, all of those congratulatory things.
You continue walking, you don't get congratulated for every day.
It almost feels like abandonment, maybe. Maybe parents, the idea of parents, and whenever you raise children and you're doing this stuff, you think that because they know how to pick up their stuff, they've got it figured out. So you're just like, go pick up your stuff. You leave it alone. You're done with it. You're like, yep, done my job, taught them how to pick up their stuff. Do they understand the core principle of it? So if you're having a rite of passage, a way to test the things that you're teaching, that's the thing. It has to be a way to test what you're teaching. As somebody that would be to administer a rite of passage for my children, it has to be to the things that I am teaching them. Because if I'm not teaching them, what the fuck is the point of the rite of passage?
Right. Just celebration.
Like when whenever I'm 12, 14 years old and I decide I want to get baptized, why?
Well, that's something that Justine did bring up, was that it's a little bit difficult to lock it down into certain age groups or ranges or whatever, because there's a variability in human beings, you know. And again, I want to just address the diaper thing. To me, I never really wore diapers. I up until the age of 1, I had cloth diapers, and after that, I didn't wear diapers.
Oh, you're gonna really hate old age, bro.
I know, right? Oh well, more time spent, eh? So to me, it's like I really had this, like, idea that is kind of the average age where you don't wear diapers anymore. After one, you're not a baby anymore.
Yeah.
You start doing.
I actually think it's achievable.
But then again, you have to be considerate of the fact that there may be medical issues, there may be psychological issues.
Psychological issues is a big thing.
Yes. So the rite of passage of being potty trained now, or being potty able, since we have to start using all this PC language.
I didn't know about that one, but I better check myself.
I just made it up, but I'm sure it's coming.
Damn it, you started something.
I know. That's how it all happens. They make fun of shit, and then people take it serious.
Somebody gets offended by a joke.
Yeah. So so there's variability within human beings, and I think to simply expect someone to have a certain level of achievement by a certain set time, I think it's unrealistic, and I think it has to be more.
That's what your sister was talking about with age, the age discrimination thing is it takes some people longer to get there, and those people that don't get it at the time they're supposed to, they're left. They're left behind.
Yes.
Society leaves those people behind because they don't progress with society, but that's still an achievement nonetheless. It's still good. It's still something greater than what they were.
Yeah, I mean, and to highlight that, give an example from my own experience, the thing with driving again, after I didn't have that rite of passage as a teenager, there was really no interest in society for me to learn to drive. As far as society was concerned, as a thing, there was no interest for me to learn to drive. There was no, that point had passed. Now I'm an adult. It was taken for granted that I know.
Yep.
And when I reported that I didn't, then it was like, oh, okay, anomaly. All right, move on.
Yeah, it's like being very assumptive, but it also makes you. What is common sense? Makes you ask, what's common sense?
Right. But again, the driving it only became a rite of passage for me when that thing became important, in this case to my employers. It was important that I knew how to drive. So me going through the studying it, practicing, doing a test, I was going through a process, a rite of passage, showing that I can do this thing that is useful to you, my tribe, my employer,
Yeah, that's definitely. I think that's the same equation down to what it is, because if you're looking at the core principle of the rite of passage, it's solidifying that you do know this, right? Sometimes you get a certificate to prove it, but sometimes you have to just accept that you know with no certificate, or it's yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that just reminds me briefly of James. He was telling me about when he was a kid, he did this thing where he had to go into the woods and had 3 things, and they had to cook a meal. Like it was a pound of ground beef, a grapefruit, and something. And with that, they had to make a fire and cook a meal. And
that grapefruit does not sound good.
Well,
I know you don't know exactly what it's talking about, but look, some ground hamburger meat with some citrus in it, put on a fire. Just cut it up in the chunks. You know, when we go camping, I'm gonna try it. See what happens.
The thing is, when James started telling me about this pound of ground beef and a grapefruit, and I was thinking, he's about to tell me a dirty joke, isn't he?
Do you clear out the grapefruit, or what's happening here, man? Throw it on the fire, let it get warm.
Yeah, let it get warm. That's exactly what I told him I would do. Stick in the grapefruit.
That would be a rite of passage for camping. Get the grapefruit warm.
Nice, definitely.
Ooh, so think about American Pie. Have you ever seen that movie?
I've probably seen enough clips of it.
Okay, so that's kind of like a rite of passage movie, right? That's a movie that represents the end of high school, right? That's that big party at the end of high school, right? And all that stuff, and everybody's going to be there, and all this shit like that, all this thing, right?
So graduating into adolescence.
And they're like, okay, cool. Now that we're graduating high school, we can do the wild shit because we couldn't do it while we were in high school.
Sure.
So it's just we get to unleash, we get to be adults, right? So that's the whole premise of the show, right? Then the experiences that come therefore. So, so there's a lot of rite of passage movies. So I think that we're probably going to eventually talk on this again, because we could probably talk about a whole rite of passage movies episode.
Oh yeah, now I'll start thinking about it.
It just hit me, bro. But we're at an hour 9, so we can't get into it right now.
Oh,
so
we're gonna have to keep
yeah,
waiting.
I think we're gonna definitely do a Rite of Passage movies because I think this is something that we're gonna talk about because we discovered too. There's a lot of Rite of Passage songs.
Yeah, right.
So stay tuned for more for this stuff to help determine what a Rite of Passage may be. Maybe you're looking for developing one.
Yeah, stand up for your rights.
You got to fight for your right.
Fight for your right to
Party.
passage. Oh, party.
Yeah,
right.
Beastie Boys.
Right.
You got to fight for your right.
To Ferris Bueller.
I know normally we go through the reading and stuff like that again, but there was really no significance to the reading unless David wanted to break down if you wanted to do the reading.
Yeah, no, I'd just want to reemphasize the first line. You know, yesterday there were so many things I was never told. Now that I'm starting to learn, I feel I'm growing old.
Yeah. So I think that so that came to through the ether. David, we were talking about Rite of Passage, and just boom, busted out this non-popular Guns N' Roses song. So if you haven't heard it, go check it out. It actually is a pretty good song. If you can deal with Axl Rose being very intimate with a microphone,
Always.
yeah, pretty much. But
at least it's only in the mouth region this time.
yeah. So again, if this is if this is your first time listening, if your second time, fourth time, 100th time, hopefully you haven't listened to 100. That means that you didn't understand what we said and you had to listen to a couple episodes a couple times. Anyways,
Please do.
But yeah, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. I know that some of the things some of the people may not agree with, but honestly, we're just trying to discern this stuff. We're trying to talk about. We're trying to understand it a little bit better, and we're sharing us trying to understand it better with you, right? So one of the things that I think I want to point out before we close the episode is a lot of these things are for mental health. Like actually, most of the things that we talk about, it's about self-awareness, right? And I think that David and I agree on the fact that I think self-awareness is a key element to overcoming suffering, right? So if you can understand what self-awareness is, right, then you can understand where you stand in life, right? So all of these things that we bring up, like what is a rite of passage, right? Some people take that for granted. Like what is a rite of passage?
Sure.
Often people don't talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah, no, some people just passage right through life.
Yeah, and all of these things that we don't have time to learn because we're inundated with information all the time, like those traditions, there's value in those things because they taught lessons, right? The process, like James always likes to say, the process,
Exactly.
right? If you don't have the process, what good is the achievement? Because can you achieve it again the same way, right? The same thing with the rite of passage. There has to be a process. It has to be to something. It has to serve a goal. It has to serve a function. It has to do something. But there are ways in life that if you haven't had a rite of passage to achieve a rite of passage, because you can still affect the people around you, right? You can still affect the youth of today, the youth of tomorrow, the people immediately around you, all that stuff, right?
I know we've got to cut it short now and not get into it, but I do wonder whether rites of passage to be effective need an element of tradition so that that they're translatable across generations.
I think once you've created so like let's say once I'm a grandfather, right, and my son or daughter has instilled some similar philosophy as to way that I've achieved, like let's say a rite of passage, right? Then I would say it's sustained in tradition. Once it's exceeded the original, it has to be separated from the original source by at least one, right? And then once it is, now you've sustained a tradition, right? Because it's only generational, from one to the next, but then it's traditional as well. Generational would be carried on through the traditions, the traditional thing would be as it's passed on, right? But my goal with my family is to have something that can be malleable, right? The principle remain, but all of the other things are negotiable,
adaptable.
Yeah. So like in my house, I like to say there are things that are negotiable and there are things that are non-negotiable. The non-negotiables are always non-negotiable, right? And if you can accept in life, there are just some things that are non-negotiable, things you cannot change or do shit about. Non-negotiables. Move on. No reason to waste your time there. Maybe you can sit in time by yourself and think about why they're non-negotiables and present questions, and maybe you can change that. But in the house, the philosophy sets the non-negotiables. They're just things that you just don't question because they've already been questioned, because you need to progress further along in the thing.
You need to have that as a starting point so that you don't keep starting from point zero.
Yes, you have to have a process. The process being in place to instill those lessons, so that way you only have to learn a lesson once because the process.
You don't have to bake a loaf of bread every time you want a sandwich. Go make me a sandwich. That's tradition for you.
You can check us out at buymeacoffee.com/driftwood. And also, I want to give a shout out. We had somebody that caught us up on the TDP number 52, I believe it was. TDP number 52 Magic 8-Ball episode. They stumbled across it. They went to the Buy Me a Coffee, left a review, bought us a coffee, said have a hot cup on them. So
appreciate it.
Guys, so if you want to see some of the stuff that we got going on, we got exclusive content over there. Go check it out. There's some things that just go check it out. You can find us on all of the social media platforms at the Driftwood Podcast. All the ones that matter anyways. DRYFTWOD. Again, that's buymeacoffee.com/driftwood DRYFTWOOD. I got a little too fast ahead of myself. So love you guys. David, you got anything else to add before we close out this bad boy?
No, man.
I do want to leave with one piece of advice.
Oh boy.
Trust yourself. Just trust yourself. You know better what you're doing than you think. Trust yourself. And if you're not sure, find some safe people to talk to. You need to be on the search for safe people to talk to, people that you can share with.
Well, I would say if you're having problems trusting yourself, stop doing that shady shit. Do trustworthy stuff.
You understand what is right and wrong to some degree. Now use that as an identifier to figure out what you think is right and wrong. Ask yourself the questions. Trust yourself, though, guys. Love you. We're out.